everybody, and welcome to 2ZQ Hot Takes, where we discuss issues both big and small. I am your host, the very handsome Tim Kirk, and this time I'll be talking about the butterfly effect. Now, I suspect there are a few tinfoil hatters out there decrying the recent NASA DART mission with the belief that,
"You fools! You have alerted hostile alien races to our puny existence, and now they know just how truly vulnerable we are. You doomed the planet, doomed us all, you fools!"
And I don't think the basic concept of the butterfly effect is that far-reaching in what people would like to think is practice, but from Merriam-Webster, there are other entries about the butterfly effect. And we'll start off with the fact that the world is vast and complex, and it may sometimes seem that our small decisions and actions have little to no impact on the big picture. However, if you think about minute details of your life, you may be able to see how a small event was actually the catalyst for a large change in your life. For example, maybe you bumped into someone at a coffee shop that happens to work at your dream company and eventually got you an interview there. What if you had chosen a different coffee shop or had been there 5 minutes later? You may not have met the person that got you into your dream job. The idea that something small, like getting coffee, can have much larger effects, such as altering your career, is called the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect rests on the notion that the world is deeply interconnected, such that one small occurrence can influence a much larger complex system. The effect is named after an allegory for chaos theory. It evokes the idea that a small butterfly flapping its wings could, hypothetically, cause a typhoon. Or it could not. The mind-boggling part of the butterfly effect is that it's virtually impossible to predict whether a small system will lead to chaotic behavior. It used to be thought that the events that changed the world were things like big bombs, maniac politicians, huge earthquakes, or vast population movements. But it has now been realized that this is a very old-fashioned view held by people totally out of touch with modern thought. The things that really change the world, according to chaos theory, are the tiny things. A butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazonian jungle, and subsequently a storm ravages half of Europe. From Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. Key terms: chaos theory. Now, there are a number of aspects to the chaos theory. Number one, the butterfly effect is part of chaos theory, which states that there are limitations to predictions even in small, discrete systems. Chaos is possible because systems are extremely sensitive to initial conditions. 2. Small differences in starting conditions can, over time, make a big difference in the way that a complex system of interrelated phenomena evolves. Systems usually have feedback loops, which I've discussed before, which also means that once those small differences are incorporated within its system, there is no telling what will later be affected. It is out of our control. Chaos theory is specifically interested in the study of random or unpredictable behavior, even in systems that are supposed to be governed by deterministic laws. Deterministic laws are supposed to remove any randomness, as determinism, in a philosophical sense, is the idea that all events are completely determined by previous existing causes. The butterfly effect dispels the idea of a deterministic system, as it suggests that there are non-linear ways in which very small differences change the effects of a cause. Another term is black swan. The butterfly effect is related to another phenomenon, the black swan. Black swans are events that are outliers, seemingly random but with life-changing impact on our world. The key understanding of black swans, similar to the butterfly effect, is that it is impossible to predict these events even though they are ultimately consequential. In terms of history, the earliest utterances relating to the butterfly effect seem to have come from Benjamin Franklin from the 13th or 14th century. Well, that doesn't make any sense. He offered a poetic description of the idea that small things can have significant effect on larger consequences. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. However, ideas similar to the concept may have been circulating for centuries. The butterfly effect was first named by meteorologist and mathematician Edward Lorenz. Lorenz was searching for ways to accurately predict the weather. However, he found that mathematical linear models did not provide accurate predictions. Just as it would be almost impossible to predict that you would land your dream job by deciding to get coffee, Lorenz found that initial weather conditions were not sufficient indicators of future weather conditions. Lorenz realized that small changes in initial conditions could lead to drastically different effects when he changed an initial atmosphere condition by 0.000127. Such a small, seemingly insignificant change caused a model to predict very different future weather conditions. He realized that minuscule changes in a starting condition could mean an enormous difference in later events. In 1963, he published a paper with these ideas titled Deterministic Non-Periodic Flow. In this paper, he essentially argued that weather predictions are inaccurate not only because knowing the precise starting conditions is impossible, but a tiny degree of change also throws off the results. The paper was scientific and jargon-heavy, which led Lorenz to start using a more palatable concept during interviews, the butterfly effect. He likened his findings to the idea that a butterfly's wings flapping represent the tiny change in atmospheric condition that could have the potential to alter the trajectory of a typhoon. He stressed that it didn't necessarily change the course of events, but that it could, and that there was essentially no way of knowing what caused changes in weather. Lorenz, therefore, advocated for deterministic chaos models that account for the exponential growth of errors. Well, Edward Lorenz was the first to put together these thoughts into a publishable paper and the first to liken the concept to a butterfly flapping its wings. It is thanks to Lorenz that the concept is deeply embedded within popular culture. His metaphor allowed the concept to be taken out of purely scientific discourse and be understood by the general public. James Gleick is also an important name when it comes to the butterfly effect. He popularized Lorenz's ideas in his book Chaos, Making a New Science. The book suggested that prior scientific theory that assumed that insights into the initial conditions of things was a good predictor of future conditions was inaccurate. Ray Bradbury. Often, the term the butterfly effect conjures up Ray Bradbury's short story, A Sound of Thunder, which was actually published in 1952 before Lorenz's paper. The protagonist, Eccles, in the novel travels back in time and kills a dinosaur. When he returns to the present day, the world as he knew it has completely transformed. A small change in conditions alters the world that Eccles once knew, a tale that has now come to be associated with the butterfly effect. Or, in The Simpsons' Treehouse of Horror, "Oh, I wish I hadn't squished that fish." Eric Bress and Jay Gruber. It's almost impossible to talk about the butterfly effect without discussing the 2004 movie of the same name, directed by Bress and Gruber. The movie applies the butterfly effect theory onto the lives of 4 children, examining how small actions that occur during time travel alter the course of each character. Consequences. The butterfly is literally all about consequences. It describes how very small things can have great impacts, which mean that we can't just ignore the little things. As I always say, it's all the little things, and all of life is just little things stuck together. Even the identification of the butterfly effect had significant impacts on how scientists and economists understood the world. When Lawrence discussed his findings, it had a significant impact on the way people understood scientific predictions. Up until this point, science had used linear, deterministic models that assumed that it was easy to trace the path between a cause, A, and an effect, B. There was a generally held belief that scientists need not worry about minute details external to the phenomenon that was being studied, because it would have no impact on the relationship between A and B. The butterfly effect demonstrated that causes and effects do not have a purely linear relationship and do not exist independently to other things happening externally, making it difficult to accurately make predictions. But the butterfly effect has consequences that fall outside of science as well. The butterfly effect is widely studied in business because it suggests that small initial actions can lead to yield great rewards in the future. This suggests significant insights for marketing. It suggests simple actions could be a catalyst for attracting lots of customers and becoming a successful business. Additionally, the butterfly effect more accurately captures the complex market that we operate in. Marketplaces are complex systems with many interconnected pieces, especially in today's modern world. Whether a business falls or succeeds may be attributed to very small details in their strategy. How about that? Physician Dr. Rajagopal writes about the butterfly in competitive markets in his 2015 book. In the book, Dr. Rajagopal explains how successful businesses like Apple and Nestle often approach the competitive market by introducing small changes that result in a major effect on the market. For example, think about the fact that Apple often only introduces small technological upgrades between their iPhone models, but still, each time they release a new model, the devices are often flying off the shelf. Since it is difficult for businesses to accurately predict how they will fare in a competitive market, it is better to focus on small, controllable details. With its focus on interconnectivity, the butterfly effect also indicates that an individual's actions can have ramifications on a wider population. Just think about how much a political leader's actions impact the state of the world. The butterfly effect asks us to be thoughtful with our decisions because we never know what the consequences of those decisions are. It can also be incredibly motivating, as it suggests that our actions do matter in altering the trajectory of the world, no matter how small they might be. Such information is important when it comes to issues like climate change because people often believe that their individual actions will not have a big enough impact on carbon emissions. The butterfly effect suggests that while a small action, like choosing to use a reusable straw, may not have a linear effect on carbon emissions, but that it could still alter the trajectory of climate change in some ways. So there have been controversies. It is sometimes debated whether the popular understanding of the butterfly effect is accurate. In popular discourse, the butterfly effect is often akin to the idea of leverage. The Book of Teams, New Rules of Engagement for a Complex World, describes this likening to be a mistake, suggesting that the butterfly effect does not describe the ability for a small thing to be leveraged to manipulate greater effects. This is because a key point of Lorentz theory is that things cannot be predicted by their initial conditions. Although small things can have a large impact, it is difficult, if not impossible, to accurately predict the relationship between small actions and effects. As we have mentioned, the butterfly effect does not mean that small things will necessarily lead to large consequences, but that they equally could or could not. Chaos cannot be predicted, which means that the butterfly effect should not mean that we should understand small actions as tools for manipulating outcomes. The butterfly effect also doesn't spell out good news for many economic models. Economic models are often predicated on the idea that consumers have stable, well-defined preferences, which makes their behavior easy to predict. However, if the butterfly effect is true, then it suggests not only are these models false, but perhaps no universal predictions of human behavior are possible. Although dismissing the idea of predictions altogether may be drastic, the butterfly effect at least demonstrates that we cannot trace linear relationships between causes and effects, and economic models may need to be reconfigured to incorporate a certain level of uncertainty. COVID-19 is a good example of how a small incident can have a disastrous impact on the entire world. There has been speculation that a pandemic was inevitable given the interconnected state of our globalized world, where it is impossible to stop something happening in one country to spread to other nations. Navindu Kutagampola, a financial investor, describes the way that COVID-19 has evolved as an example of the butterfly effect. It began in a food market in China and today has touched almost every single city in the world. A small incident has had nonlinear but massive impacts on the world and society, with the consequences exacerbated because we are so connected. Additionally, COVID-19 shows how different sectors are all a part of a complex system, and therefore how when there is a change in one sector, like health, other sectors like finance, mental health, or the environment are also impacted. As was earlier speculated, the butterfly effect can demonstrate how small individual acts can help contribute to the state of our Earth. There seems to be little agreement on what will happen to planet Earth as a result of human activity, but it is generally accepted that our activity has had drastic impacts on our environment and that habitats have changed as a result. Earth is one massive, complex ecosystem, but it is important that we realize that one generation's collective actions can have incredibly powerful and scary consequences on the system, an idea that stems from the butterfly effect. Even though we may not be able to accurately predict what will happen if we continue the way that we are, as the butterfly effect does not pretend to be able to trace how small actions have larger effects, it does demonstrate that what we do matters. Instead of believing that we are doomed and there is no way for our individual actions to change the trajectory of climate change, the butterfly effect suggests that our small actions could quite strikingly alter the route we're on. And has been mentioned, COVID-19 is a great example of the butterfly effect. Although it may be easy to trace relationships between things like COVID-19 and the economy, the article explored how COVID-19 has also led to economic behavior that would be hard to trace linearly or hard to predict. And the sources for this were Farnham Street, November 27th, 2019. Also came from P. Halpern in February of 2018, Chaos Theory, the Butterfly Effect, and the Computer Glitch that started it all. Forbes, B. Davy, and articles Encyclopedia Britannica about Chaos Theory and Determinism. Well, there you go with the butterfly effect. And as Dr. Frink might say, there's ample room for scientific and unscientific speculation. Thanks for listening. See you next time. And as the kiddies say, peace out.